Thanks for joining us, everybody. Apologize for being a little bit late. A few technical issues we had to sort of iron out, but thanks for being with us. Here again this evening with Craig. I'm not. This is really cool. We had about 50 people sign up for this event, so that's really great. Really kind of a sellout crowd here. So thanks to all of you for that. We're gonna go through 7 pretty unique, pretty special spirits this evening. And I was kind of reflecting on this as I was doing my work to sort of prepare for this tasting. Compass Box, the name itself kind of counts for a lot, and I think that's pretty cool. If I called this a blended whiskey tasting, probably all of y'all would be doing something else with your Thursday evening. So glad that you're here with us for this. And we have Andre Roy. He made it into the stream. God bless you, my friend. Glad you're here. And happy that we can see the chat here. So we've got 7 very unique, very different spirits we're trying tonight. And it's probably worth doing a real quick sort of overview of some of the sort of linguistics of product types in the spectrum of what Scotch whiskey is. So whiskey produced in Scotland, there's a few different sort of categories that are worth knowing before we dive in here as to exactly what they mean. So as far as what's sort of most common and what's most popular, what maybe a lot of you might be most familiar with would be something referred to as single malt Scotch whiskey. So that's malt whiskey made from malted barley produced at a single distillery. So when you see things like, Glenlivet 12-year-old, that's a single malt Scotch whiskey because it's made from 100% malted barley distilled at the Glenlivet distillery. Another category of spirit that you have is called single grain Scotch whiskey. Now that is grain whiskey distilled at a single distillery. So whiskey distilled typically from maize, wheat, rye, basically whatever's cheapest. Grain whiskey tends to be the sort of type of product that's put into blended whiskeys and things like that as the majority component. That being said, they're produced in very different ways. Malt whiskey and grain whiskey produced in very different ways, and they have very different sensory qualities. And we'll sort of get into that as we dive into these 7 whiskeys here. Jim saying, I'm doing something wrong. I have 2 audio feeds. Okay. We'll stick with us. Hopefully we'll be able to sort of iron that out as we proceed. But anywho, so that's grain whiskey. And then you have some sort of styles of whiskey that are combinations of those two. So you have what's referred to as blended Scotch whiskey, which is a combination of malt whiskey and grain whiskey. You have blended malt whiskey, which is a combination of only malt whiskeys. And then you have blended grain whiskeys, which are a combination of only grain whiskeys. So it's confusing. The language is a bit confusing, but at the end of the day, the whiskeys are very good. And Compass Box is kind of cool because I think they sort of flirt with the weirdness of the regulations as far as that's concerned a little bit.
Question for you.
Yeah, Craig, hit me. And please, my friend, interrupt me yes, thank you.
Vatted whiskey.
Yeah, so some of you who are a bit maybe started getting into whiskey a while ago, in like the 90s, you might be familiar with a term called vatted malt. That term is defunct. It's not really used anymore, but vatted malt is equivalent to today's terminology of blended malt. So it's malt whiskey from multiple distilleries.
And was there a particular rationale behind burying that term?
Well, maybe there's some politics about that. We'll get into
We'll
get into that in due course. As we sort of dive into some whiskeys here, maybe that will help us with the politics of it. Who knows? Who's to say? So that's a real quick overview of different styles of Scotch whiskey. We'll even get into some more unique things like the legal concept of what's called a spirit drink in terms of Scotch whiskey. That'll become relevant in a few whiskeys from the beginning, but that's a real quick sort of idea of we're getting into the murky territory tonight, and I'm excited about that. I think it's really cool, and I think hopefully we'll be able to sort of problematize the concept of what is a blend, and what does blending mean. So without further ado, I suggest we get to whiskey number 1.
Let's do it.
Let's do this thing.
This is exciting because I haven't had much experience with Compass Box.
Yeah, you're sort of new to these guys.
Truly.
Yeah.
Like, I think I've had just the affinity, but that was a while back.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
This is good. I'm excited.
Yeah, they're an interesting company. They in all of their kind of promotions, what they call themselves, they don't call themselves blenders. They call themselves whiskey makers. So
sounds like malarkey.
Yeah, but I mean, to a degree,
I get it.
Hey,
I get it.
It's worth being skeptical of everything in this sort of side of the industry. But
they don't not make whiskey.
Yeah,
but I get it.
I think it's a fair point because especially with the whiskeys we're going to be trying tonight, we're talking about batch sizes of 5,000 bottles or even less than that, and we'll sort of dive into a little bit more about what that means as we go in. But yeah, let's do dram number 1. This is exactly the type of whiskey I like to start with. It's high in ABV. This is 53%, and just like a really rich sort of good way to kick your palate off on a Thursday, I think. So
I didn't have any lunch, so
so we'll see. We'll see what happens. And please do chime in on the chat if you're check out the video on YouTube. Sign in if you want to join in on the chat, and share your thoughts. Share your. We like to at Keg N Cork like to talk about our feelings when we do whiskey tastings. So please,
especially after 3 whiskeys,
please share those. I mean, I am sort of joking, but I'm also a little serious about it too. It's a lot of what we'll talk about. Craig and I, we're both sort of individuals that have our own sort of aroma and flavor vocabularies, and it's not going to be we're not going to have the same vocabularies, I guarantee it, as the ones that you folks have at home. So one of the things that I think is fun about tastings is that we're sharing these ideas. We'll agree, we'll disagree, maybe we'll find points of continuance, but at the end of the day, it's all a bit of a laugh. So yeah, we're not. It's not total. If at some point someone starts nosing at whiskey and says daffodils and delightful, it's like that might that's okay. We won't go there. So but do enjoy these whiskeys for what they are and enjoy where they take you. So whiskey number 1, which is Hedonism Felicitas.
So this is a blended grain?
Indeed. So this is a blended grain whiskey. So this is multiple grain whiskeys blended together.
Okay.
So multiple distilleries distilling whiskey from grain, and then put together in this bottle.
And they're using whatever grains they can scrounge.
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I mean, something to consider about grain whiskey distilleries is that they're using whatever grains are pretty much whatever's cheapest. Andre says, damn, I was going to say daffodils. Sorry, my friend. That tasting note is done forever.
Find a new one.
So grain whiskey is, as you're nosing and tasting this, I'll talk a little bit about grain whiskey, what grain whiskey is all about. So grain whiskey is very different from malt whiskey, what people commonly know as Scotch. So grain whiskey is distilled in thoroughly unromantic distilleries. It's a very different type of still. So they don't use a pot still like those beautiful copper pot stills with the neck and the line arm. That's not what you see with a grain distillery. So a grain distillery uses something called a patent still. You'll also sometimes hear it referred to as a coffee still, Coffey, after its inventor, Aeneas Coffey. Basically that type of still is, it's a modern still. It was invented in the late 1800s, early 1900s, if I'm not mistaken, and distills a very pure spirit to a very high alcohol volume. So spirit leaving a grain still, a coffee still, will be 96, 97% alcohol. So it's very pure. There's very little flavor left. Essentially, at that point, you could make the argument, and hopefully maybe we'll get into a bit of a debate, but at that point, it's kind of a solvent.
Now we're talking.
But now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because these stills, they're also referred to as continuous stills, because they're always running. It's not a batch distillation. These grain distilleries are constantly feeding this fermented wort into these stills. They're always running. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, producing this very high alcohol. But what's nice is that this goes into casks, and it doesn't really contribute a lot of oiliness or a lot of those sort of qualities you typically expect from a single malt. Mm-hmm. It's very sort of neutral, so it lets the oak that it goes into sort of be the sort of main thing that you get. So like on this whiskey, right off the nose, it's just like vanilla, this big, just bang, like, it's like vanilla extract or Madeleines, just has that sort of sugary vanilla kind of quality. This is what I perceive. I don't know how you guys feel or what you think about it.
It's like a vanilla frosted rubber ball.
Vanilla frosted rubber ball, yeah.
Like a racquetball.
I mean, yeah. So, but you have that sort of really pure spirit that's not oily at all. It doesn't have a viscous, long finish, mouthfeel. These things. It's quite clean, mm-hmm. And it just acts as sort of a canvas for these oak, vanilla, and sweet sort of flavors that happen there with grain whiskey.
Do we know what kind of oak this was in?
Yeah, so Compass Box is actually pretty good with transparency, sort of talking about exactly what is in their whiskeys, the components, and things like that. So actually, on the very back of this bottle, you'll see they'll tell you actually a full breakdown of what's in it, the cask type, and all those things. What they can't necessarily tell you is the age. So why that is because in Scotland there's a regulation that the sort of any number that appears on the bottle must be representative of the youngest whiskey that's in the bottle. Now, Compass Box is a blender, so or whiskey maker, as you may say. They're putting whiskeys together. There's going to be maybe some younger whiskeys in there, maybe some older whiskeys in there. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really seem right to just put the youngest number on there. What they want to do is give people the full information. So, but the whiskey regulations don't sort of allow that right now. So what they do tell you, and what they do give you is sort of a bit of an overview of what's in there. And actually, anybody can email Compass Box and just say, hey, can you tell me what's in this bottle? And they'll give you a very detailed email about exactly what's in there, because they actually want to share this information. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of not sort of being able to under the current regulations in Scotland. And for what is Scotch whiskey. We'll get into a bit more why those regulations exist, what function they serve, whether they're any good or not. As we proceed, but as far as hedonism felicitas is concerned, I'll fill you in on some of the details. And if you don't catch these all as I sort of give them, that's fine. We can sort of reconnect after the stream is over, and I can give you all this information. But hedonism felicitas is a blend of 4 different parcels. So 4 different sets of casks. And so you have a 19-year-old refill sherry cask from Port Dundas, the Port Dundas distillery, which is doesn't exist anymore. It's a demolished distillery. It's now an apartment block, a block of condos. So,
glorious history.
Yeah. So, so that's actually the youngest grain whiskey that's in here, is 19 years. So this has got some age stuff in it. The next youngest is from North British, the North British distillery, a 23-year-old, done in recharred American oak. And then we have a 24-year-old North British, just 1 year older, in recharred American oak. And we have something from Strathclyde, a 30-year-old Strathclyde, done in first fill bourbon barrels. So that's kind of the composition of this. And you'll notice it's a little bit different. I mean, it's grain whiskeys tend to end up in these refill casks, and they they get forgotten in warehouses and age out to significant ages. Compass Box, with this release and with a lot of the releases that we'll actually try tonight, and I'll try to point this out to you guys as we go there, but my feeling is that actually they do a lot of sort of recasking. So they'll put these whiskeys into a recharred barrel. Because recharred barrels, it's a very new sort of invention in the history of Scotch whiskey. And I would be very surprised if, for example, the North British parcel that's 24 years old spent 24 years in a recharred barrel. My feeling is that's probably finished in a recharred barrel. But anyway, we'll get more into that as we proceed. So this first one, really nice. I don't find, there's not a whole lot of burn on this. I don't find it to be overly...
Not at all, no.
Aggressive on the nose.
It's just vanilla.
Yeah.
To me. It's almost like vanilla, like cake icing.
Yeah, for sure.
Frosting, donut icing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and there's a degree to which grain whiskeys they don't have the same complexity as malt whiskeys, just because they're distilled to such a high proof. There's not really a whole lot of room for that sort of oily complexity that you expect. What you really get is just that sort of oak thing, and that's really nice. I like that. For someone who likes bourbon, Scottish single grains are kind of awesome because it's sort of a Scottish take on the style of bourbon where you have a really pure spirit that showcases the oak influence. So
when the distillate is fired out of the patent still, or coffee still, whatever you refer to it as, is it akin to like a vodka? Is it kind of in that same vein, or is it... Am I way off base here? I've
never personally tasted spirit directly from a coffee still, mainly because these facilities are like not open to the public.
So they're factories.
They're factories, and I think they're beautiful, but but the traditional sort of what people perceive to be a distillery, these they just sort of, if you're Edmontonians among us, and if you're on the Henday going north. On the left-hand side, it kind of looks a bit like a grain distillery. They're factory type operations. So myself, I've never had that spirit, 96% distilled spirit. I'd love to try it.
So would I.
But yeah, no kidding. But my suspicion is that there's probably not very much flavor or aroma left that's reminiscent of the grains that it originated from.
Like vodka.
I hesitate to use the word vodka.
I hate vodka. Because vodka's so bad.
Yeah, because it's not interesting. But what we have here is very interesting. So
indeed, much more than vodka.
So what I would say is that you have these distilleries making something very pure that's typically not going to age very long because it's going to go into your Johnny Walker Red Label, and it's going to make up 70% of the recipe for that blended whiskey, blended Scotch. What we have here is very different. This is much more aged, spent much more time in cask, and yeah, hard to even call it the same thing in that sense. Andre says in the chat, does Compass Box have any core expressions, or are all their offerings limited in quantity? That's a good question, actually. They do have some core offerings. We're not drinking them tonight though, because whatever. But they do actually. They have. I shouldn't say that. But they do have very good core expressions. Great King Street, which is like $50 in Alberta. It's great. A really nice blended Scotch with a high malt component. It's like 50% malt whiskey, 50% grain whiskey, which is much higher than your Johnny Walkers and your typical blended Scotches. That's really good. They do a version of that called Glasgow Blend that has a bit of a peat element to it. That's very good. And a whole bouquet of other core releases. So there's a lot. Someone's saying, I'm finding it hard to hear Craig. Don't know if it's just me. Okay, we'll look into that. Thank you. Or not.
So I'm not terribly interesting because I don't know much about the whiskey.
but yeah, so they do have some core releases, and they're very good. But we're sort of diving into some of their more exotic releases tonight. Yeah, which I'm excited about.
Have you tasted it yet?
So this, yes, and I love this. I mean, myself, grain whiskey I like a lot. Mm-hmm. It tends to be a bit more crisp. It tends to be a bit more delicate than malt whiskey. So not everybody likes grain whiskey. I mean, it's a bit of a love-or-hate type thing, Personally, I love it.
I do rather enjoy this.
Yeah.
There's like a nuance of fruit.
Yep.
From that cherry, I think. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much dominated by vanilla. So
yeah.
I can kind of parse out a bit of the dark fruit that may be implied from the cherry.
Yeah, well, and so like as we said, and as Craig points out here, we have 44% of this blend mm-hmm. was aged in a refill sherry casks. That's not very typical for grain whiskey. A lot of times grain whiskey will be filled into refill hogsheads, refill casks. Not a lot of attention is paid to cask management just because it's destined for, I don't want to say inferior products, but products that don't exist to be drank in a serious way.
More readily purchased.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more common, a little bit, you know what I'm saying. So,
I got you. I appreciate they kept it. It is cask strength?
I believe it is. Okay. Yeah,
I do appreciate they kept it at cask strength.
Yeah, that's nice and
more flavorful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just less watered down. That's all that cask strength is. But really complex, really deep. There's a little bit of an herbal sort of notes, it's sort of weaving in and out there that I think is really beautiful. And consider Compass Box. They celebrated their 20th anniversary last year. Mm-hmm. But recall that their first ever release is called Hedonism, and you may have seen it before. It's a core release from them, and it's a blended grain whiskey. This sort of the delicateness, the subtleness of grain whiskey is kind of really central to what Compass Box does and what they're all about. And this is a really nice, a limited release of that. So this is
This is then a celebration of that.
This one in particular, no.
Of their
the next one a bit more explicitly than that, but yeah, I mean, this is sort of just another one of those releases of Hedonism, a special release of Hedonism, and a limited release.
But it's not to commemorate an anniversary.
Not as far as I'm aware, but I've been wrong before, so.
Fair enough.
But yeah, beautiful. I get to a little bit, our friends in the chat saying, whatever you did, it worked. So thank you to our producers. I'm getting thumbs up. This is great. I could drink with these two guys all night, whether there's people in the chat or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's for me, like I get sort of like banana, like sort of banana-like tones on this, but just very delicate, very subtle. You know what I mean? It's not like when you have a single malt, it's sort of a smack on the face. It can be very impactful. Grain whiskeys are a little bit more sort of reserved. You sort of have to approach them a little bit more to find the subtleties.
Okay,
but they're so nice, yeah, and that's awesome stuff. At 53%, drinks like milk.
Like milk?
but you know, sweet, silky.
Gotta love that silky milk.
Yeah. So, please do share with us in the chat what you thought, how you felt about that one, or if you're already on the 7th whiskey. I'm sorry, my friends. But let's go. We'll go on to the next dram, which is another blended grain. So another grain whiskey from multiple grain distilleries. And this one is called Hedonism, the Muse. So give this one a nose, give it a taste, and then we'll get into what it's all about. Definitely different from the previous. I mean, these are both blended grain whiskeys. They're both the same style of whiskey, but very, very different. More
earthy. I can almost call it almost musty.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Like a gently perfumed attic. If that makes sense.
That makes total sense, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bit more of like I perceive a bit, almost like a bit of like a bit of a citrusy note on it that wasn't in the previous one.
No, I can't really parse out citrus. But musty, earthy, some grassiness for sure for me. Mm-hmm. This one I find more herbal than the first one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Herbal, yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Herbal.
Andre's saying softer on the nose. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit more, maybe like, I find it more balanced on the nose. It's a bit less kind of assertive.
Yeah, this one's just an uppercut of sweet.
Yeah.
And this one, it's more dialed back.
It's dialed back is a good way to put it. There's maybe just a bit more complexity to it.
Mm-hmm.
This is also bottled at full strength, 53.3%.
Are there special releases typically higher strength?
They can be, although not always. Like we'll try. I mean, I sort of saved 2 of the big bruisers for the first 2 whiskeys. The rest are I think pretty much without exception 46%. So,
okay.
But like I was telling Craig, we were talking the other day. I mean, what could be more boring than something that is merely pleasant to drink? How terrible is that? What I think is exciting and dynamic about whiskey is that it can shock the palate. It can be aggressive and surprising, and that's how I like to start a tasting. If it was up to me, I would have started with Peat Monster Arcana, but I would have got flack for that. So,
7 glasses of Peat Monster.
So yeah, I have to be conscious that there's people that don't like peat and things like that. But to start with some full strength whiskeys, that gets the palate really ripping and roaring and ready to go. I think anyway. And the Muse, this is so nice. So one thing I like about Compass Box too is that they're very sort of untraditional. Not only when it comes to what they're bottling, they're doing these blended grains and things like that, but also like in their sort of information, they also give really nice sort of drinking recommendations. And in this one, the recommendation that they give, I think, is quite beautiful. Drink this whiskey whenever and however you like. As any true hedonist would, which I like. And they suggest to try it with salted caramel. I think makes sense. That I get that. There's an affinity there.
I mean, I would wrap anything in salted caramel because I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, that's beautiful. Just on the palate, the sweetness. Just so much more rich and I hesitate to use the word luxurious, but
it is luxurious.
Is that the word?
It's like walking up a staircase of vanilla.
Yeah.
No, it's really good.
I like that. Smooth, creamy texture on the taste, very nice. In the chat saying, some people saying more herbal than vanilla. Andre asks, in your opinion, Dave, what makes the Muse more expensive than Felicitas? Well, I didn't blend these, so I can't really say. But my suspicion is that probably just the age of the whiskeys that went into it is going to be the answer to that question. Typically, what you have to consider is that whiskey in a barrel in Scotland evaporates at a rate of 2 to 5% per year. And as whiskey evaporates, there's less to put in a bottle. Prices go up. You're paying warehousing fees, storage fees, all these things. So just the fact of evaporation leads to more expensive whiskey. So my guess is that's probably what's at play here. Just based on flavor profile, you can tell Muse is just older, more complex. Mm-hmm. It's more depth to it.
Very much.
It's an older whiskey than Felicitas, just guaranteed. I don't have the exact age information on Muse, unfortunately, but you don't have to be a scientist to know, like, yeah, Muse is just more complex, deeper. Mm-hmm. It's an older whiskey.
I like how the hit of sweetness isn't sudden, like it was with the Felicitas.
Yeah.
So it's gradual. Like, it gets sweeter as it kind of goes down your throat.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Jason said it's like walking up a red carpet-lined grand staircase.
Grand staircase.
It's very poetic.
Thanks for chiming in, my friends in the chat. I appreciate that. It's like good to see some of the responses there. But you'll find that with older whiskeys, it's a good way to sort of distinguish younger whiskeys from older whiskeys. Younger whiskeys often will hit you with their power sort of on the tip of your tongue and very early. Mm-hmm. An older whiskey, I mean, a lot of people refer to it as, oh, it's smooth. But what that experience is exactly what we're tasting here, where it's much later on the palate. There's a longer mouthfeel. There's a deeper flavor.
Definitely.
All these things sort of in concert with each other.
100%.
If you care to sort of develop your palate for, deciding what's an old whiskey and what's a young whiskey and impressing your friends, they won't be interested, I guarantee. But even for yourself, yeah, Muse, it's just got those signposts of an older whiskey.
Yeah, I'm really quite curious now how old the components are.
Yeah, and so an email to Compass Box is in order for this one. Mm-hmm. But again, sort of like the Felicitas, they're using a combination of cask types. Mm-hmm. So they're using this sort of standard what's typically used, like a refill hogshead, which is like a 300-liter cask. That's the sort of, I don't want to say gold standard, but it's what's typically used in whiskey maturation, especially with grain whiskeys, because refill hogsheads are just a dime a dozen.
Okay.
But they're also using in this, like in Felicitas, they're using recharred barrels, sherry butts, and things like that. So
I have a question.
That's a component. Yeah. What's up?
So casks are charred initially,
yes. Yeah.
Before the whiskey enters the vat or the barrel.
Yes.
So when you say recharred, are they charred more deeply from the initial char? Are they scraped and then recharred?
Yeah. So thank you for asking that, Craig. here's what happens, and I've got my little barrel stave here to illustrate. So
I didn't even notice that. We didn't plan this.
We didn't plan this at all. I swear to God. So this is my little barrel stave here. So this is obviously just a prop. It's a small, these barrels we're talking about are 250, 300 liters. They're quite a bit bigger. And then you have sherry butts that are 500 liters, gordas that are 600 liters.
What was that, gordas?
A gorda. Yeah,
gorda?
Which in Spanish, I believe is fat. Yeah. Every time I do one of these streams, I say something that's 100% wrong. So, and I just noticed, I was looking back at the tasting we did last month, and I said something ridiculous, which I'll correct later. But anyway, please correct in the chat if you feel like it. So this is what a barrel looks like on the inside. So on the outside, you have this sort of this oak grain that a lot of people are familiar with, the look of that grain. On the inside here is the char of the barrel. And yeah, someone said in the chat STR casks. That's partially right, but not 100% right. So a rechar cask is basically after this cask has been filled with whiskey and aged, the barrel itself is dumped, and then what they'll do is they'll take the heads off the cask and then just scrape like a quarter inch off of that barrel stave, and that's going to scrape the char off, as you can see, and then it'll scrape the sort of wood that was having an exchange with the whiskey itself. And then it'll kind of look like this. It'll look like the outside of the cask, but on the inside, because that char has been scraped off, and that infusion material has been scraped off as well. And then they'll rechar it. So that's the R of an STR cask. So that's the rechar part. Shaved, toasted, recharred.
There are varying degrees of recharring.
Yeah, so it's like anything like with a cask, you'll have light char or heavy char. Heavy charred casks are sometimes referred to as alligator char because they'll get this sort of like scaly sort of look to it, a lot of charcoal on it.
Gotcha.
And then you'll have toasted casks, which is more sort of a tradition in winemaking, and it'll look actually more like on this side here, where you don't really have like a charcoal layer. You sort of have, it's kind of like when you're making toast in the toaster. It gets this sort of like caramelized color and aroma and flavor to it. Yeah, and that's more of a wine thing, is toast. But as we get into the whiskeys here, actually Compass Box, they do play with some toasted oak, and it's very different. STR casks are typically with casks that are referred to as STR for Jim's sake, as I'm sure you already know. Typically STR is Portuguese red wine casks. And that's our dear departed friend Jim Swan. Mm-hmm. His concept was using shaved, toasted, recharred Portuguese red wine casks to age single malt. That's not necessarily what's in here, not those wine casks, but would be like a recharred bourbon cask.
And the STR method, is that exclusively red wine, the Portuguese red wine?
Usually when people refer to STR, it's that. But I mean... Shaved, STR stands for shaved, toasted, recharred. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it could go both ways.
So when you see like Kilchoman or Cavalan, I guess, the Vino Barrique, those are Portuguese red wine.
Yeah, indeed. Because Jim Swan was a consultant on both Kilchoman and Cavalan. Okay. So that's sort of a tradition there. But yeah, STR, at least as far as I'm aware, can refer to just the process of shaved, toasted, recharred, or that Jim Swan Portuguese red wine cask, STR. Yeah. So
I'd be curious if it'd be just as effective in other types of casks, like a bourbon or a...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very new process. And that's what I say too, like, when we're drinking some of these grain whiskeys, that the components are 25 or 30 years old. Mm-hmm. This STR process is very new. And it's sort of I mean, if you're a cynic about it, you could say, okay, this is just a sort of technique to revive a tired old cask that was just going to get thrown into the fire pit anyway. But at the same time, with these STR casks, you get, a caramelization of the sugars in the oak, a reactivation of lignin, and there's a rejuvenation aspect to it as well. So, anyway, without getting too deep into the weeds,
of course, a Scotsman thought about that.
Yeah. Well,
how can we save this old tired barrel from retirement? We got to use it 2 more times. We'll just burn it again.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, sometimes it works, and I think, at the end of the day, I mean, you can quibble about production processes as much as you want. If you like the whiskey, I mean, that's all you need to know. And this, I think, is beautiful.
These first 2 have been excellent.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's a shame that blends kind of don't share that same prestige with single malts.
Yeah, well,
really, because there's some really awesome ones out there. Yeah, as evidenced by this.
Yeah, even the word blend. I mean, people use the word blend to mean one thing, but it's actually a really multifaceted idea.
Yes.
Where you get blended grains like these first 2 that are. If someone said, "Hey, do you like blended Scotch?" I mean, who thinks about something like this? To answer that question, you know what I mean? The word blend is sort of unfortunate. Mm-hmm. It's at least in North America, I think it has this sort of baggage associated with it, because everyone thinks, when they think blend, they think, oh, yeah, Johnny Walker Red. Yeah, I know what a blend is. I've had a blend. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But this is a blend.
This is a delicious
It's a blended grain whiskey.
Very good.
A combination of barrels, a marriage of barrels. And there's really not that many barrels that go into this that make up this really beautiful whiskey that we just had. Mm-hmm. So okay, I think that being said, we can proceed to dram number 3. The third dram that's not a malt whiskey. And this, to me, I really love this. And again, it might be a little bit divisive because kind of sort of like grain whiskeys, it's a bit different. It's a bit unique. It's not something you've ever had before.
So this is the one I have had.
Okay, yeah.
And if I recall correctly, it's Calvados?
That's right. So it's actually a blend of malt whiskey and French Calvados.
Okay.
So Calvados, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a French apple brandy. So it's distilled from apples. And you don't really need me to tell you that because you just knows this, and it just jumps out of the glass. That's it's beautiful, beautiful stuff.
I wish this was in a juice box.
I would drink this if it was a juice box. Yeah, and a really complex apple flavor too, though. I mean, it's got a really the apple, but also that sort of earthy, like apple skins and that sort of, like if you've ever been at a cider production facility on the day that they're pressing apples, like this is the smell. It's that sort of smell of subtle sort of oxidization, apple oxidization when it starts to get a little bit brown. And yeah, just earthy and beautiful stuff.
It is very nice.
Yeah, you will notice though, as far as when we're talking about regulations and what do we call this blend of Scotch whiskey and Calvados, Scotch is not, drink it with a bendy straw, yeah. You'll notice Scotch, you won't see it on the front of this bottle. That word doesn't appear on here. Because just in terms of regulations, you can't call this a Scotch whiskey because it's been blended with Calvados. So to earn the title of Scotch whiskey, or to have the title of Scotch whiskey, it's better said, must be matured for a minimum of 3 years in oak casks, less than 700 liters in Scotland. And there's some other geeky rules that I won't labor here, but that does not apply to this at all.
Nope.
This is a blend of obviously brandy and Scotch, so it can't be called Scotch whiskey. What they call this is the sort of catch-all phrase for weird stuff that has no other definition in Scotland. They call this a spirit drink. So a little bit weird, and the Scotch whiskey sort of regulations are very much structured to preserve history and tradition, and as we proceed, we'll get into that a bit more and whether that's worth doing. But yeah, this is not Scotch. You can't call it Scotch. This is a spirit drink. So have a nose, have a taste, and enjoy. A lot of sweetness on this. The fruit on the palate is just outrageous. Like that's.
It's like someone wrapped an apple slice in cotton candy.
Yeah,
like that candy floss kind of stuff.
There's a candy floss element there. But just like that apple flavor. I mean, it's trivial to say that it's the distilled flavor of apple, because that's literally what it is. But yeah, it showcases that beautifully. But very brandy forward. Brandy, I would say that apple quality that's very much the meat on the bone of this. But you know a lot of times when you have fruit brandies, they can be a little bit what's the word for it? Like sometimes in wine you'll hear people say like it's like flabby, where it has
it's news to me.
Yeah, it has like a lot of the flavor, but it doesn't have something to cut it. It doesn't have maybe acidity sometimes to cut it. You get it sometimes with like mead and cider too, like cider that's just like really sweet and just doesn't have control. It's not tight. This is beautiful because it has that fruit, really impressive depth of fruit flavor. But I think that probably that Scotch whiskey component just adds that little bit of sort of, just cuts that fruit component and leaves it with that sort of nice dry finish, and brings it down to earth a little bit, like, in terms of like if you're a whiskey drinker. Okay, now I have a sort of frame of reference for this.
aside from the fruit and the sweet, I can't. This one's tough for me. I can't really pick out more individual notes.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, especially coming off the Muse, which is so complex and profound. I mean, is Affinity a terribly complex spirit drink?
To me, it's
probably not. Yeah,
I mean,
but it's quite forceful, you know. So it has those sort of qualities at the very front, but it doesn't. I mean, it's tough to compare to something like the Muse back to back because it's just so complex in comparison. But so that's the story of Affinity. Consider, and this is something really worth, and this is, you know, like when we're trying these Compass Box special releases, we're drinking whiskeys where the total global release on a lot of these, like we're talking 4,000, 6,000 bottles, and that's true of Affinity, 6,028 bottles in the universe. And I know at least 3 of them have been opened in this store. So, so consider, okay, 6,000 bottles. That means that the entire batch of this beverage is about 4,500 liters. Okay, that sounds like a lot. But consider, okay, this is cut down to 46%. So in actual fact, the spirit that went into this bottle was comprised of probably only about 16 barrels of spirit.
Which isn't a ton.
That's really not a lot.
It's not a lot at all.
If you've ever been to a distillery and you've seen, a rack of barrels, I mean, 16 barrels, that's nothing. I mean, that's a couple racks of barrels. So they're really playing with very, very small amounts when they're blending. And, you see some of their blending compositions where, there might be only 7 or 8% of one component. And it's like, that's not even a whole barrel that they're putting in there. That's only a portion of a barrel or something like that. So yeah, when they're putting these together, that's where I think, whiskey maker, they don't call themselves blenders, they call themselves whiskey makers. And I think this is where you see the truth of that, where, it's not like they're saying, what can we put together that we can bang out the door? It's like, okay, well, let's use a quarter of this barrel to enhance this bottling in some way. Yep. So yeah.
No, I kind of see that now after having 3 whiskeys. Like it's more than just blending. It's I do see that they're creating something more unique and special than just a blended whiskey.
Yeah, and about creating a sort of a character. And sort of everything's going to be different. It's but they're going to have, each one is going to have its own sort of character. Yeah, and I mean, it's worth saying that the whole concept of a 4,500 liter batch in the context of Scotch whiskey as a whole is hilarious because when distilleries are putting some of these releases together, they're combining thousands of barrels. We're talking about tens of thousands of liters as just one component of a blend. So the fact that there's a company, hidden away, putting these little releases together at 4,500 liter batches is it's pretty special.
Very cool.
The fact that it comes to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, I mean, wow, like that's, What
are you saying about Edmonton?
Anyway.
Say no more.
Another story for another day. But so that's Affinity. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully that was a new experience for you. For me, the first time I tried that, it just absolutely floored me. I love that stuff.
Very good.
And hey, would you sit down and spend an hour with that? Probably not.
I would.
But or yes.
I would happily.
But for me, for something to sip on, like before a meal or after a meal, to me that's just beautiful. Just something to excite the palate, and that's exactly my type of thing. So, okay, we'll go to dram number 4, which is. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't mixed up on what you're seeing here. The whiskeys in front of us. Let me just do this. Yeah, so the next whiskey we're going to try here is juveniles. Dave says, it means we drink a lot.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, well, so juveniles. So it's actually kind of cool trying juveniles and Delilahs back to back, because these were both blends that were created for whiskey bars. So juveniles was created for an establishment in Paris, and Delilah's was created for an establishment in Chicago. So these are sort of tributes to sort of whiskey places around the world. So we'll give juveniles a try. Give it a nose, give it a taste, and see what you think. I mean, definitely, okay, now we're into malt whiskey territory. You can smell it right away.
So just to clarify, juveniles is in no way indicative of the age of the whiskeys?
Well,
or will we find that out?
Maybe we'll discover that.
Okay.
Give it a try.
Because it does smell younger than the previous iterations.
Yeah. How do you mean?
Not as punchy. Like these three had a really robust aroma, whereas this one, and I know that's not indicative of all younger whiskeys. Like I've had some young whiskey that's super punchy.
Yeah.
But just curious.
Yeah, I mean, there is this. What I will say about juveniles is that it doesn't have the same sort of cask influence that the previous three have had. I mean, that's undoubtable, because it's a bit more maybe spirit driven, where there's a bit more of a maybe fermentation characteristic, a bit more of a graininess to it. So yeah, that can be an indication of youth. Yeah. And the fact that it's called juveniles is maybe a little bit tongue in cheek on that in that respect.
This one is much more solventy.
You find
almost like a shellac, like chemicals you find in a shop.
Shop chemicals.
Yeah. But with some fruit kind of interspersed throughout.
Yeah, there's fruit. For me, I mean, again, everyone's going to have their own sort of sensory vocabulary to draw on. For me,
I do still smell apple, and I think that's because of
but I was going to say, like, there's sort of a fruity, floral, grassy sort of thing, all sort of trifecta happening all at the same time.
It is quite floral. Jason says it lifts right up into the jowls. So this is
straight to your jowls.
Straight to my jowls.
But it's nice, I kind of like this just as a fan of single malt, as a fan of malt whiskey. This is okay. We're back to earth a little bit. It's not so crazy anymore, and this is a bit more familiar anyway.
So it's not as earthy. I don't get the mustiness from the grain whiskeys. I don't get the perfumey attic I referred to initially.
Yeah.
It's good kind of going through this, because I can now distinctly kind of identify the grain stuff from what you say here is more malt driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's ideal too. I mean, that's the whole what you want to get out of a tasting is be able to sort of begin to delineate in your mind. Okay, I really like this about grain whiskeys, or I really dislike this about grain whiskeys. And then as you move and compare and contrast, that's why, if you have the opportunity to be at home and you have all these poured, great to just, give a quick nose to whiskey number 1, and then back to number 4, to give you sort of a full impression of how far we've come, and we're only halfway through.
This smells like gummy bears and coconut.
Yeah, so yeah. I'm a peat lover, so this is very tame but herbal. Yeah. I mean, certainly no peat whatsoever on this, on juveniles.
I'm also a peat lover.
You're peat, I'm
a peat guy.
So this is what is referred to as you drink and enjoy this. I'll sort of give you a bit of a background on what this is. This is what's called a blended malt Scotch whiskey. So it's worth breaking that apart. So what blended means in this context is that this comes from multiple distilleries. Multiple malt whiskey distilleries. So there's no grain whiskey like the first 2 that we had. None of that whatsoever in this. This is just from malt distilleries.
Yep.
So if you like single malt Scotch whiskey, malt whiskey from a single distillery, chances are a well-made blended malt, you'll probably like too, because it's literally of the same
foundation
of the same ingredients, which is malted barley, which is this, our friend right here. That's what malt whiskey is made from. That's all it is allowed to be made from in terms of fermentable sugars. That's all they can use is malted barley. So that's what single malt Scotch whiskey is made from. That's what blended malt Scotch whiskey is made from. All that blended means is that it comes from multiple distilleries. Anyhow. Please, let us know. Jason's saying hints of allspice. I buy that.
I'm getting more like a pear.
Pear, like there's some weird, like very delicate things on this too.
It's like someone put lipstick across a pear. That's exactly what it is. I'm tasting it.
There's a real sort of subtle beauty to it, actually. And actually, on the palate, the balance is very nice too, because it's assertive, but it's not harsh. It's interesting in its dynamics that it's not boring. That's a really beautiful sort of balance that it strikes, is that it's not aggressive, but it's not boring. That's really nice. And the other thing to know about this bottling is that it comes with a treat inside.
Was that the cowbell?
So when you want to call your friends,
butler,
your friends to the table to have some whiskey, use that one. So that's Juveniles.
Is Juveniles the name of the bar? Or is that just...
It is,
that's so what did they... Like, what's the kind of background behiund that? Like, did Juveniles have a part in creating this whiskey? Is there something they wanted specifically to be reflected? Well, let me tell you,
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
Next
whiskey then.
But what I can tell you, so this is about twice, the batch size is about twice as large as the previous. Okay. So with Juveniles, about 14,000 bottles worldwide. But even still, that's very, very little.
Small.
That's a very, very small production. What we can say about the components of this, in case you're curious, in the stream, average age on this is about 15 to 17 years old. The malt whiskeys that comprise this blend. You have a 17-year-old Glendullan in first fill sherry casks. Sort of interesting. Fairly pale in color, so it comes as a surprise to me.
Glen what, sorry?
Glendullan.
I don't know if I've heard of that.
Yeah, Glendullan, you'll see it's sometimes you'll see it bottled under the name Singleton. So in those sort of tall flask like glass bottles.
Is that Dufftown? Is that?
So there will be Singleton of Dufftown,
okay.
A Singleton of Glendullan.
Gotcha.
You sort of have to it's in sort of curly script, so they sort of obscure the name. But anyway, Glendullan, it's I believe a Diageo distillery, a big distillery that goes into blends and things like that, but you'll see it sometimes bottled as Singleton. And then you have a 10-year-old Strathmill, 16-year-old Balmenic, 17-year-old Clynelish, which Clynelish is like a lot of Compass Box blends you'll find have some component of Clynelish.
So how much of the Clynelish is in here? Does it give a percentage?
I can tell you, it is 20%, so it's pretty substantial, yeah.
Maybe that's like, because Clynelish to me is very waxy.
People say waxy is like, that's what they call Clynelish. I've never personally understood that, but there's a lot of things I don't understand, so.
Clynelish to me is very shellacky.
Like that solvent sort of
So maybe that's what I'm getting in this.
It could be, it could be, and a lot of Compass Box whiskeys, you'll find at least some component of Clynelish. They use it a lot in their malt blends.
I love Clynelish, actually. Yeah. I've had a lot of Clynelish, and it's quite good.
Honestly, their single malts are really, really interesting.
Very good.
Yeah. And then you also have a 15-year-old Clynelish in here in a refill sherry butt. So there's actually like quite a bit of refill sherry that comprises this bottling, which is sort of interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that.
No, because typically sherry for me is dark fruits.
You think fruit, you think sweetness, and this is not like that.
This is just vanilla.
I think just kind of that refill sort of element that that is nice. So
Witchcraft.
yeah. Well, and just as a matter of logic and reason, the vast majority of casks that have whiskey in them in Scotland are refill casks because they've been used multiple times. That's sort of the tradition. Are those malt whiskey components ID'd on the bottles? Asks Sherwin. Yes, they are actually, which is really nice. So I'd show you. I'm not really sure what our camera shots are showing here, but Compass Box is actually very good at saying, okay, here's what's what. Of course, as we sort of alluded to earlier in the tasting, they can't tell you the ages because anytime you talk about an age, you have to talk about the youngest whiskey in the bottle. That you can't talk about older whiskeys that are in it. You know, at this point, I mean, grab the next whiskey, Delilah's, and I'll regale you with a rant about why that is. You know, it's like, why would it be that you can mention the components of the whiskey itself, what distilleries they came from, but not necessarily their age statements? Feel free to chime in the chat if you have a feeling for what the answer might be on that. I think it's worth kind of considering the way that age statements work in the whole context of spirit production. So, and especially rum. You know, you see things like Zacapa 23, which some of you might be familiar with. A lot of people sort of assume, oh, that's a 23-year-old rum. Well, no, it just has the number 23 on the label. So it's sort of, it's sort of, oh, it is, you know, they lean into the idea that, oh, it's 23 years old, but it just has the number 23 on it. So obviously that's the sort of thing you want to avoid, because doesn't really reflect the integrity of the spirit that's in the bottle. Especially if you're a single malt distillery, you've been distilling, you know, since the 1800s. You have this long history of producing in a traditional manner. You want to avoid that sort of skullduggery of just putting a number on the bottle that that doesn't reflect anything. Now, where the Scotch Whisky Association, the governing body that sort of makes these rules for Scotch whiskey, has landed is to say any number you put on the bottle must be the youngest whiskey that's in this bottle. So if it's a combination of casks and you buy a Glenlivet 12, you know, there's going to be some 13-and-a-half-year-old in there. There's going to be some 12-and-three-quarter year in there. There's going to be some 12-year-old in there, but absolutely nothing younger than 12. So that age statement on Scotch whiskey is sort of a guarantee to say nothing younger than this. But the effect of that is to say, listen, you can't put any other number on there that refers to older whiskey, because then you start to get into this sort of rum pirate tradition of just throwing a number on there and it being an inference that no one's really confident about. So that's the rule, and you know, it works for a lot of distilleries because they just put a number on the bottle and people have a rough idea of what it might mean, and there's a consensual understanding of that. Where it breaks down is companies like whiskey makers, like Compass Box, that are sort of really playing and doing different things, where it's beneficial to know, like, okay, yeah, there's some 30-year-old in here, but there's also some of this and some of that and some of this. It's a really sort of something that's been constructed. So, I mean, Compass Box themselves played with this whole idea and this whole notion a few years ago when they came out with a whiskey. Some of you may be familiar with it, called 3-Year-Old Deluxe. That might have been before your time, Craig. So they released a whiskey called 3-Year-Old Deluxe. Of course, and it had a big number 3 on it, a 3-year age statement, and it was sort of a joke because, you know, 90% of that blend was a 25-year-old Talisker.
Oh my God! Really?
And just a little sprinkling of 3-year-old. I think it was Clynelish. I mean, I've made a mistake. I'm already positive, but that was the idea: is that, okay, this is, you know, we have to call this a 3-year-old, but you know it's more than that. So that's kind of the ideas they're playing with here.
And was this 3-year-old expensive?
It was expensive, and it was tasty, but
25-year-old Talisker.
Yeah, it was a very, very well aged Talisker. It was quite a nice whiskey.
Talisker is a beautiful whiskey.
Yeah,
I really do like Talisker as well.
I mean, even when it was on the shelf, people were kind of freaked out by it. You know, it's like, oh, is this $300? And it's 3 years old. Like, what's the deal? Like, wait, tell me. So then you sort of start to get into like, oh, okay, well, they have to call it a 3-year-old because blah 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 blah. So they were prodding a little bit at the notions that people have about age statements.
Very cheeky.
Yeah, which is worth doing.
I like it. I think that's pretty cool.
Because, I mean, yeah, a lot of people see an age statement and think, oh, that's an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's a marriage of barrels where the youngest age of that combination of barrels is 18. So, anyhow. We'll move on to Delilah's, obviously in color, quite a bit deeper. And this is where you start to get that sherry component, I find.
It's more sherry forward than the juveniles, for sure.
You get that sweet, you get that sort of kind of raisiny, someone in the chat says, Talisker is alcoholic swamp water. Well, hey, each to their own. What if I like alcoholic swamp water?
I've had some questionable things.
Don't at me, bro. But yeah, this Delilah's definitely has a bit more of that sort of raisiny, sort of dried fruit, a little bit of that, but it's not over the top. Like it's there, but it's not, you know, like. A bit of that, I don't know if it's just me, but sherry kind of casks always bring to mind sort of like sort of stale basement smell.
There is a mustiness to it.
Yeah, you find, yeah. And, you know, some people love that. Some people, you know, whatever. But, you know, it's a personal preference, you know, that's cool. But this is nice. And, I mean, so, you know, full disclosure, you know, I think, you know, I speak for Craig, but myself as well here, where the whiskey strength that we're typically used to, that we're drinking here at the store and sampling and sort of evaluating and analyzing, tends to be cask strength.
Tends to be.
Yeah, so like the first two whiskeys that we had that were higher in strength. And cask strength is sort of where you get all that big flavor. You know, the last 3 whiskeys in a row that we tried are all 46%, but they haven't suffered by that.
Not by any means.
I don't think,
Nope.
Like they're very characterful and very interesting, even after they've been watered down to 46. Now, I mean, to say that they've been watered down, you know, maybe that's contentious. But,
diluted?
But you know, they've been brought down to, you know, a bit more of a sort of consumer-friendly strength.
I would love to see them add cask strength.
Yeah, I mean, I'll
awesome.
I'll never not wonder about that. But at the same time, I don't really know if there's anything where I think, oh, this is a bit thin, you know, or like, oh, you know, like they're all really sort of interesting at the strength that they're at, which is nice. Jason says this one has really nice legs. Yeah, so if you're the sort of person who likes to look at your whiskey, I tend not to for very long, but if you like to examine its appearance. One thing you can do is sort of roll it around on the inside of the glass, and you'll see that. Hopefully, my video production guys don't zoom in on this because there's fingerprints all over this glass. But you'll see, you know, like the sort of beads that sort of fall down the glass. You know, you'll see sometimes fancy wine people spending all night looking at those. But yeah, it'll tell you a little bit about the whiskey. It'll tell you a bit about age. Tell you a bit about consistency and texture of the whiskey. But again, your friends will hate you for spending time doing this. So don't, unless you want to.
Andre says 46 is the new 40.
Yeah, you might be right about that.
No,
you might be right about that.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
We should see more 46s.
So, but it's worth, you know, it's. I won't go on and give a bunch of ridiculous tasting notes about Delilah's. Just please enjoy it. What I will go on is another rant, which is that.
Yes.
Thank you for everybody who's still attending the stream.
Well, how many do we have? 30.
We're almost, yeah. So what I will say is that, 46% is the new 40. Okay, so what does it mean when you have a whiskey that's 40%? What does it mean when you have a whiskey that's 46%? So you may, the attentive of you, those of you who drink as much whiskey as I do, will have noticed it's kind of common to see whiskeys bottled at 46%. And what does that mean? And it's very common to see spirits bottled at 40%, whether you're talking about gin or vodka or other terrible stuff we're not going to get into tonight. So 46, what is 46? So something about all of the whiskeys all of the drams that we're trying this evening is that they're non-chill filtered. So we're sort of getting into some more sort of in-depth technical terms here, but what does non-chill filtered mean? So chill filtration is something that you'll see happening with spirits. Anything bottled at 40% will have been chill filtered, because if you were want to do such a thing, you could take water and add it to this whiskey here continually, and you would notice that there would be sort of a haze that would start to form in the whiskey, because this whiskey has not been chill filtered. None of the drams we're trying tonight have been chill filtered. But when you see something like, Bombay Sapphire at 40%, that has been chill filtered. So what they do is they bring the temperature down of that whiskey, and they filter out those components that form a haze. So that, when you have a gin and tonic with Bombay Sapphire, I don't know why I'm ragging on Bombay Sapphire, but it's on YouTube, it's here forever now, so I might as well commit. When you have your gin and tonic with Bombay Sapphire and you put a big handful of ice in there, it doesn't cloud over. It stays crystal clear. You have this crystal clear gin and tonic. Same thing with, Glenlivet 12 at 40%, or Glenfiddich, or whatever you have. You have this clean that has ice in it. It's ice cold and it's crystal clear. It's because they've removed those elements that create that haze at that low temperature. Well, what are those elements that create a haze? They're oils. And if you know anything about cooking, fat equals flavor. And those oils are the things that give you mouthfeel and texture. So, when you have, and now I'll say this, it's neither right nor wrong. When you have something like a Glenlivet 12 on ice, I love it, because it's like drinking a beer. It's like just, wow. And very little, it's not, you don't have to sit, you're not having a religious experience with that. With something like this, you could still very well drink it on ice, and some of the tasting recommendations actually say, try this with ice or try it with soda. It's not going to be perfectly clear because it has those oils still intact, and those oils are what give you that finish, that texture, that depth on the palate. So hopefully that explains chill filtration. If people have questions about that, please chime in. But yeah, none of these are chill filtered, because why would you chill filter something? It's just a cosmetic thing. But yeah, it's nice because it has the sherry aspect, but sometimes that sherry, that sort of wet basement thing can overpower. This is in balance with everything. It's yeah, really nice. Okay, let us. Someone says Gorda equals flavor. See. Let's go on to Rogue's Banquet, which I'm really excited to include in this tasting because as the budget was being sort of figured out for this tasting, I snuck this one in. So nobody knows except you and me.
I'm glad you did.
Let's give it a nose and give it a taste. This is, the most expensive compass box I have on the shelf right now.
We're back to the grain whiskey now?
No, well, so Rogue's Banquet is, like Delilah's, it's a blended Scotch whiskey. So it's a good question. Thank you for asking. It's a blended Scotch whiskey. So it's not a blended malt. It's not a blended grain. It's a blended Scotch. So it has malt whiskey and grain whiskey.
It smells like grain whiskey.
Do you find there's a graininess to it? Yeah.
If I compare it to, say, hedonism.
Oh, hey, fair point.
There's like a definite grain aspect.
There's a continuity. Yeah, sure. Yeah. discernible continuity there.
But the Felicitas smells so good.
Oh, Felicitas, I mean, yeah. But
it smells amazing.
You know, you do this Rogue Banquet, and it's like, you remember, what's the name of that store? It's like like the Body Shop, and they have like that that sort of like tangerine soap. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
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 This is like Body Shop tangerine soap. There's a tropical sort of like tinned fruit. And that's typically, you'll get that from like a very, very well aged single malt. You tend not to get tropical notes out of grain whiskey. You'll get it out of malt whiskey. That's been aged in casks for a very long time, 20 plus years. So when I get tropical notes, I think, okay, there's an aspect of this where, okay, you got a single malt that's at least 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
When you get that sort of like tinned tangerine, just that really vibrant tropical note. That's beautiful, very complex. I mean, you think back to like sort of the Muse. This is that same sort of echelon of complexity.
Clearly, it's much older.
Yeah,
because I'm getting all the flavor at the back of my tongue.
Mm.
I guess that's my own personal litmus test. It's like a citrus vanilla pudding, kind of for me.
Okay.
So it's very luxurious on the tongue, but it's like a whipped dessert almost.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from on that. Yeah. It's very, I'll say this too. But that's what I like about all these whiskeys at 46 that Compass Box is doing here. And every whiskey is different. So, I've had a lot of whiskeys at 40% that were really harsh, and I've had a lot of whiskeys even at 65% that were just like buttery. At 46, these just strike that perfect balance. The blending is such, the whiskey making is such that they just have that sort of impact without the harshness,
They don't suffer whatsoever.
Yeah,
from being
it's just
denatured.
so beautifully done.
No. I would spend several hours with this.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Just parsing it out.
There's a lot to it. No question about that.
I'm sure it would evolve magnificently over time.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing too. I mean, leaving it in your glass if you can, that's great. But so Rogue's Banquet, this is their sort of official 20th anniversary celebration whiskey. 5,267 bottles. So very, very few. Sherwin says, I have that orange hand degreaser. yeah, but you know what? I get it. Yeah.
I would not think Gojo.
Yeah, Gojo.
When I sip this.
I mean, there's that sort of like, almost like faux orange.
Like Fojo?
But anyhow, so 5,000, less than 6,000 bottles, very, 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 very limited production. And I will tell you, this is actually fascinating. I learned the composition, the structure of this as far as ages go.
Wow. So
the youngest whiskey in this blended Scotch whiskey is a Glenelgin, which is a single malt, at 19 years old in a recharred cask. So I would expect finished in a recharred cask. And then the other three components are all 25 years old. So if you were going to put a traditional, Scotch whiskey age statement on this, it would have to be what? 19. However, it's worth knowing that the other components of this are 25 years old. So you have a 25-year-old Kleinlich in a refill barrel, a 25-year-old Milton Duff in a recharred hogshead. And Milton Duff usually you'll get weird floral notes out of. And then a grain whiskey, North British, in a first fill bourbon cask, also at 25 years old. So you have that sort of trifecta of 25-year-olds with a little bit of 2% of 19-year-old. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of beautiful. As you're putting this blend together, you think, what does this need? And someone somewhere down the line said, this needs 2.3% of a 19-year-old to make it perfect. So that's pretty cool. But I mean, certainly, you nose and you taste this. Yeah, obviously older than 20 years old. Okay, so that's Rogue's Banquet. Very nice. I mean, what more is there to say about that?
It's delicious. It's really, really good.
Okay, so we'll move on to our final dram, which is now a blended malt. So it's 100% malt whiskey, but from various malt whiskey distilleries. So we'll give that a try and see what it's like. And of course, you'll notice right away. This is a peated.
Finally,
a peated whiskey has a peated, smoky sort of aspect to it. So we'll give that a nose and give that a taste.
Oh, it smells so good.
And right away, I mean, just like iodine,
bacon, fish, burlap, everything I want.
Fish, burlap, bacon.
But there's still a bit of sweetness.
Yeah,
there's a sweet component to it.
I was gonna say there's like kind of like there's something actually very interesting in this when it comes to peat. There's a sort of a sharp.
When you say sharp, do you mean
I'm still trying
at the forefront?
I'm still trying to wrap sort of my head around it. I don't have the words for it yet, but I guess for lack of a better word, for me, like the medicinal aspect of this is what's very much on top, the most sort of forceful thing.
Is there Lafroig in this one?
Speaking from memory, no.
Okay.
But not a bad guess. Because Lafroig is that medicinal.
It's very medicinal.
Yeah.
To me, anyway.
But, wow. Andre's having a moment. He's enjoying this one. This is great.
Andre, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
But, I mean, yeah. See, I like finishing a tasting with a peated whiskey just because it absolutely just bulldozes everything else.
We should just do a peated whiskey tasting.
That has been done before and very much could be done again. Jason says it tastes like a Sharpie pen. Yeah. I think a lot of times, what I get a lot of times out of peated whiskey, and I had a good friend who always had Sharpie, but to me, it kind of reminds me of like those, not Sharpie, but like the permanent markers in like the silver tube.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, no.
That it just has that sort of like, it's that mix of like solventy and, I don't know the deeper molecular structure of that smell, but.
As I'm smelling this, it's becoming more floral as well. So like a.
Yeah, and that's worth saying. It's not, it's not like it's just a medicine bomb. It's got that, but it's also.
It's like someone threw a fish in a flower bed.
I want to say myself personally, like herbal, but
yes, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and the peat on the palate is not overbearing. Something I'll say about the Peat Monster line is that good though, eh?
Oh, that's good.
Is that a lot of people they see the word peat monster and they think, oh, this is going to be a big peat, like smack in your face, blow your head off peat.
It's not.
It's not.
It's very subdued.
The peat is present, but it's in balance with everything else. So the whole concept of this bottling is that they took their classic peat monster and they added a component of French oak. So that's another thing, like with Clynelish, where you'll see Clynelish in a few different Compass Box bottlings. They're also a big fan of French oak. Mm-hmm. So one of the first sort of experiments that Compass Box did, like 20 years ago, was with a bottling some of you may be familiar with called Oak Cross. Comes in the blue box. And now what they do with that whiskey is they have French oak heads on the barrel and American oak staves. So they rejuvenate American oak casks by putting those French oak staves on them. So you get that sort of combination of American oak, which is that sweet vanilla sort of brash American thing, with like the subtle sensual French oak. So that's what they do. But originally, sort of when they got in trouble with Oak Cross, what they were originally doing was putting French oak barrel staves into American oak casks.
So they would float in the spirit?
Yeah, okay. Which the Scotch Whisky Association didn't like because that wasn't a traditional method of maturing Scotch whiskey. If you look at the language of the rules of the Scotch Whisky Association, it really sort of hinges on the traditional manner that Scotch whiskey has been matured. So that was perceived as not traditional, so they got a slap on the hand for that, and they said, okay, we'll do the French oak heads. So now you'll see a lot of what Compass Box does. In some component of a lot of their blends, they'll have those hybrid casks with the French oak barrel heads and the American oak staves. Whether they're newly coopered or refill or whatever, because they have a lot of these on hand. So they've used that with this. They used those toasted French oak heads with American oak staves with Peat Monster Arcana. And it's nice. I mean, I can't say that I necessarily perceive that, but does it matter? Probably not.
So is the Arcana referring to the different woods then? Or
that's a fascinating question that I don't know the answer to. So again, very small production, 8,000 bottles, a little north of 8,000. I like, so in their serving recommendation that they give, like if you go to compassbox.com and check out their releases, you can see all of what I'm looking at here. And in their serving recommendations, they say, Peat Monster Arcana rewards experimentation. Explore how the addition of water or soda reveals new textures. So I think that's
soda water.
Yeah,
in this.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of cool. Like there's sort of you play with it, see what happens.
Blasphemy.
And actually, I mean, I didn't really mention it, but a lot of these mention add ice and see what happens, which I think is pretty good. And they also say discover how sweet its sweet smokiness reacts with creamy blue cheese, which I think is a bang on tasting note. Peated whiskey and blue cheese are a match made in heaven. So
I'll take your word for it.
But as far as the components of the whiskey itself, this one's sort of interesting. So the youngest whiskey in this is 9 years old, and what this 9-year-old component is their Peat Monster blend that they then put together and then aged in those hybrid French oak casks. So that's the 9-year-old component of this. There's also an 11-year-old component of Milton Duff, which brings that sort of floral component. Only 10% of the overall blend, so it's not like it's overwhelming, but it's significant. And then you have 72% 14-year-old Talisker. So that's where you're going to get a lot of that sort of coastal quality from. And then 6.9%, just shy of 7% of 16-year-old Ardbeg. So, I mean, that's going to bring a lot of sort of impact to this blend. And that sort of, for me, Ardbeg always brings that sort of
campfire,
yeah, but also like a dry, savory character, almost like a sort of a foodie character to the whiskey that I think comes through in this. Like it has that sort of just that, I don't know, for lack of a better word, just that dry, savory element.
This might be my favorite one.
Like this one?
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely stands out, certainly. Certainly stands out from the rest. Yeah, without question.
So Arcana means mysterious or enigmatic or supernatural.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for that in the chat. Appreciate that. yeah, so there you have it. So we've got 7 sort of radically different, unique spirits that we tried tonight. Mm-hmm. None of them were single malt Scotch whiskey, which is what we usually enjoy when we're doing these things. These are all very unique, very different, and I think all sort of have their own sort of unique niche in this whiskey world that we all enjoy. Your thoughts? Did you get a sense for Compass Box? Think some things that you thought were cool, or
my horizons have been expanded. I guess it would be a good, because I haven't had a lot of really spectacular, I guess, blends, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
No, they've all been really good. I've learned a ton, and I'm super pleased with just trying these whiskeys.
Yeah.
So now and when folks ask me at the store here, I can now, instead of just referring them to you, I can hopefully.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's good. And yeah, all very different. And they're all going to appeal to a different sort of person. So, but that's great. I hope you'll have enjoyed what you tried tonight. It's kind of a special experience to try a whole lineup of 7 of these, and they're all very limited production, just to sit down and try them. It's my pleasure to host, and really happy that we got the sort of interest that we did from people to get these whiskeys out across Edmonton and other places as well around the country. So thank you. I will say, if you liked any of the whiskeys that you tried tonight, check out the link in the description, and you'll see our website. We do have some of these for sale. Of course, like as we were talking about, like the very limited quantities for all of these. So if you liked any of these, check them out and pick one up if you want. Yeah, I think with that we shall sign off. I'll say thank you to Craig for listening to me bullshit for 90 minutes.
More like 8 hours a day.
And for Ask Photo Studios for helping us out with the tech and producing us here tonight at the shop. And thank you very much to all of you for picking up tickets and for picking up your tasting sets, or letting us ship them to your house. This is something that Keg N Cork is going to do more and more of. And thanks for being a part of it. So with that being said, farewell, good evening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.